Clashes between Coast Guard ships from the Philippines and China in the South China Sea, one of the world's busiest trade routes, escalated tension in an already disputed territory. The official statements released by the two countries regarding the incident are contradictory. The Chinese state television released footage which showed how a Philippine ship collided with the Chinese ship in the South China Sea. The state media claims the Philippine ship changed course at the last moment, causing a deliberate collision. The collision took place yesterday at Sabina Shoal, which lies about 140 kilometers west of the Philippine island of Palawan, the closest major landmass. The Chinese Coast Guard maintains that Philippines entered the disputed territory illegally, and so China reserved the right to act against the ship. The Philippines Coast Guard released footage showing damage to its vessels, claiming this was the biggest structural damage the ship has suffered at the hands of the Chinese Coast Guard. This is not the first time the countries have been involved in disputes over the coveted territory. The contested waters in the South China Sea are claimed by China, the Philippines, Brunei, Malaysia, Taiwan, and Vietnam. In the past, Vietnam has even gone so far as banning the film Barbie over a map which showed Chinese claims over the land. So why exactly is the South China Sea the source for disputes in the region? The South China Sea encompasses a portion of the Pacific Ocean stretching roughly from Singapore and the Strait of Malacca in the southwest to the Strait of Taiwan in the northeast. The sea is made up of hundreds of small islands, rocks, and reefs, the majority of which are located within the Paracel and Spratly island chains. The Spratlys are a collection of islands which lie more than 1,300 kilometers from China's Hainan Island. The islands are located in the southern part of the South China Sea and are known for a multitude of territorial claims. While many of the islands are not cultivable, the surrounding waters are abundant in oil, natural gas, minerals, and seafood. The recent collisions of the ship is part of a larger history of conflict in the region. Let's begin in 1947. In 1947, the Nationalist Kuomintang Party in China declared its territorial claims in the South China Sea with an 11-dash line. The claim covers the majority of the sea, including the Paracel and Spratly Islands. In 1949, the People's Republic of China was created under the leadership of Mao Zedong. In 1953, the government led by the Chinese Communist Party removed the portion encompassing the Gulf of Tonkin, changing the border to 9 dashes. To this day, China invokes the 9-dash line as the historical basis for its territorial claims in the South China Sea. In 1987, Beijing sank a few Vietnamese ships in the South China Sea in pursuit of a policy of expansion in coastal regions under the Premier Deng Xiaoping. In 1992, the law on the territorial sea and contiguous zones was passed by Beijing, which lays claims to basically the entirety of the South China Sea. In early 2012, China and the Philippines engaged in a lengthy maritime standoff, accusing each other of incursions in the Scarborough Shoal. In January 2013, the Philippines announced it was taking China to a UN tribunal, using the clauses of the UN Convention on the Laws of the Sea to challenge Chinese claims. In 2016, the Permanent Court of Arbitration in The Hague ruled in favor of the Philippines, declaring China's territorial claims regarding the 9-dash lines as being unlawful. In the same year, the Chinese government released a position paper detailing their stance on the jurisdiction in the South China Arbitration, initiated by the Republic of the Philippines. The position paper cited that China did not appreciate the Philippines' effort to negotiate the dispute using the United Nations. In 2023, China released a new version of its territory map that expands the 9-dash line to a 10-dash line. The new dash includes Taiwan and most of the Spratly Islands. So now that we have established the timeline of events, let's delve deeper into why the sea is so important for the invested actors. The South China Sea occupies a strategic geographical location, which makes control over the territory critical. China has amped up its military capacity in the South China Sea in recent years, with artificial bases being constructed on islands. Since 2014, China has constructed dual civilian military bases and outposts in the Spratly and Paracel Islands. The technological developments at the bases include new radar and communication arrays, airstrips and hangars for combat aircrafts, and deployment of mobile surface-to-air and anti-ship cruise missile systems. Control over these bases is important for China because of escalating tensions with Taiwan and the threat of United States involvement. Since the People's Republic of China sees Taiwan as part of its territory, it must retain controls over these connected waterways in anticipation of a future conflict. The United States and its allies are equally invested in combating Chinese expansion into the South China Sea. The increased capacity of military bases represents a looming threat to the maritime sovereignty of United States' allies. China has asserted it must prioritize building an impregnable wall for the border and ocean defense. This is important for the Xi Jinping government as the need to uphold China's maritime sovereignty and interests remains a key policy standpoint. Xi Jinping has remained in power using a nationalist revision of history. In this revision, China is entitled to use these waters because of historic claims which emphasize its regional sovereignty. In addition to historical claims, control over the South China Sea is compelling economically. The sea hosts one-third of global shipping, worth more than $3 trillion, according to an estimation made in 2016 by the Center for Strategic and International Studies. This included $874 billion of Chinese exports as well as $125 billion of imports in the region. The CSIS also calculated that 80% of trade to and from Vietnam and Indonesia passes through the South China Sea. In the sea providing transit to an estimated one-third of the world's crude oil shipments, more than 90% of crude oil volumes pass through the Strait of Malacca, the shortest sea route from the suppliers in Africa, the Persian Gulf, and markets in Asia, making it one of the world's primary oil transit choke points. Along with providing passage to oil shipments, the sea is a vital source of hydrocarbon resources. As the world's leading consumer of hydrocarbons, extraction of crude oil in the South China Sea is critical for East Asian countries. The Philippines is projected to run out of its gas supply by 2027, urging it to start greater exploration into the South China Sea. Research by the United States Geological Survey in 2023 states unexplored waters in the South China Sea may contain anywhere between 2.4 billion barrels and 9.2 billion barrels of petroleum. China is currently hosting the new president of Vietnam, To Lam, at Beijing amidst rising hostilities in the South China Sea. Amongst the diplomatic concerns to be discussed by the two leaders is increased cooperation in the South China Sea. It remains to be seen how tensions will be received by the host of countries which lay claim to the coveted sea in the future.